Good afternoon and welcome. My name's John Miller. I'm a Director of Delta SaaS Services, and welcome to our 2017 Smarter Sales and Marketing webinar series. I do appreciate you all taking time out this afternoon. I know it's a particular busy time of year and actually particular pertinent in that I've been working with my consulting hat with a number of clients who are clearly starting to make budgets for 2018. Obviously, a number of them who are still on a conventional on-premise project are looking at closing large spiky sales at the end of the year. Hopefully in a few years' time with annual recurring revenue, that won't be such an issue. And of course, probably like you as well, we're talking about sales compensation plans for next year and how we can help companies transition smoothly and not burn their existing pipeline whilst starting to drive towards SaaS and cloud. So these are obviously some of the more topical issues, but if I just by way of welcome remind people of some of the other subjects that we've touched on in this Smarter Sales and Marketing series. We're hoping to look at it holistically. We started out earlier in the series, and by the way, recordings and landing pages are available for all of these, looking at making digital content relevant. I think that's the key word from some of the recent marketing exhibitions and conferences we've been to, personalized and relevant content. In the early November workshop series, we also looked at what's the difference between a marketing website and SaaS websites, how to make interactive media really work for you, and then we moved on to looking more generically at sales and marketing platform, which are much more than, say, marketing automation and a narrow definition of that. Last week's session was well attended and very interesting, led by Rick Chapman, who's the CEO of SoftLetter, and he gave us a range of up-to-date metrics on sales and marketing from the leading SaaS and cloud companies, some really interesting benchmark data. So thank you for joining us today. As you'll see, the title of today's webinar is Digital Sales Transformation, and here we're looking at a range of tools and techniques. And I'll be introducing our guest speaker, Mark Sweetco, in a few minutes. So a little bit of an introduction to Delta. Those of you who don't know us, we've been around for probably 22, 23 years, and we've really always been engaged in business development, business transformation. In our earliest days back in 1995, this was all about the development of indirect channels and ecosystems, which for its day was something of a game changer. In the last 6 to 7 years, we've really focused entirely on SaaS and cloud, business transformation and hybrid businesses. And of course, that's really a reflection of where the IT, software and services businesses are today. So we have a range of consultants and researchers based in the UK, US and over in Asia. And we have our own network, as you might imagine, of ecosystem partners. I've mentioned SoftLetter before, and Mark from CETA will be talking to us later today. But enough about us. Perhaps I wanted to spend a little bit more time trying to put into context the whole platform of Smarter Sales and Marketing. As I said, based on our consulting engagements this year and previous years, and this year I've personally been out to the US and all around Europe, and we have some projects out in Asia. We're seeing similar trends, one of which is really around understanding today what your cost of sales is, your cost of customer acquisition is, understanding where you are today in terms of your sales cycle times and times to market. Because obviously if you're going to improve and get smarter, you've got to know where you are today. Secondly, I'd also mention that there's often a discussion, do these techniques only really apply and valid for a pure SaaS, born in the cloud type business? We would actually say that they're most appropriate to companies who have been born on-premise and are trying to make that transition and need higher degrees of efficiency. With one particular client, I call it fattening the cash cow, to enable them to migrate and transform to more of a hybrid-based business. I think also we would suggest in our discussions that smarter isn't just about a marketing automation system or some retraining of the existing sales team. It's about really rethinking and re-engineering the entire end-to-end sales and marketing process, and not necessarily building out from the ways we've been traditionally doing it, literally since the 1980s, 1990s, with the conventional sales cycles, proof of concepts, demonstrations, quotations, and so forth. We really need to rethink it. The other takeaway for me in these conversations has been as well that yes, you do need to do this in a structured way rather than piecemeal or a bit of window dressing. But I think it's also equally important that you can do it with very small bite-sized pieces, and the fantastic advantages that SaaS and cloud give us, first and foremost, should be applied to our own businesses, and in this particular case, to our own sales and marketing operations to effectively practice what we preach. If we go back and look at a high level, the reason we need smarter sales and marketing is that cloud and SaaS has redefined the end-to-end business rules very definitely, and we'll say this time and time again, has set new ways that customers evaluate, buy and use IT. Definitely brings in new competitors as well as new partnering opportunities, which of course both of which will have an impact on our own approach to sales, our own value propositions. Smarter sales and marketing very much rooted in finance, the impact on cash flow, the need, as I said at the beginning, to reduce the cost of sales. So there aren't many alternatives to this. It's not a nice to have. Wherever you are on this curve, you need to have smarter sales and marketing. So I'm sure we've all followed the trend of SaaS and cloud, and today we're really not going to go into all the research from Gartner and IDC and others that's saying how big and how large this wave is. But what we are going to point out, and I think Mark has probably got some updated and better stats on this, but we know the majority of the customer's journey today is digital. They find out an awful lot about solutions, competitors, pricing online. But the irony, if you like, and I use this phrase and I think Mark will expand on it, is that we see that a lot of the sales and marketing techniques, tools, processes are what we call analog. We see a lot of PowerPoint or Excel-based quotations, people driving in cars to face-to-face meetings, a lot of things that are perhaps not as efficient and effective as they need to be in an environment where customers are increasingly wanting to go down a digital route in their sales and marketing journey. So, just to summarize this, some of the things that we've talked about in this webinar series and we'll drill down into today has a list of 10 things that do impact your cost of sale, cost of customer acquisition, and your time to market. So it's not unrealistic to say that if today, and we looked at some stats on this last week, your cost of sales is in the 30 to 40% of revenue margin, that cannot be driven down or needs to be driven down to 25% or less, and that if today's sales cycles are typically taking 9 months or more, there's no reason why tomorrow the objective and the achievement shouldn't be 5 months or less. And of course this varies depending which market you're in and where what status you are in terms of your journey. But hopefully today Mark will give us some more pointers in how we can help to achieve that. So on that note, let me give an introduction to Mark for those of you who don't know Mark. He's the CEO of CETA, and he'll tell you a little bit more about that. But Mark has been around the sales and marketing scene for over 25 years, worked extensively globally. I know he talks about EMEA and North America here, but I know he spends a lot of time out in APAC. He's certainly worked with a number of leading IT global brands such as SAP and Oracle, but because he's worked with so many partners, he also understands the dynamics of smaller businesses, startup businesses, and last but by no means least, but hopefully not today, he is fluent in English, Italian and French. But I think today, Mark, you are going to be presenting in mainly English. So I'm going to make you presenter now, Mark. I take it you can hear me well?
Yes, I can. Thank you, John. And let me know when you can see my screen.
I can see it right now, Mark. So thank you, and over to you.
Thank you very much, John. Thank you very much for the warm welcome, and a very big warm welcome to all of those of you who joined us today. I'm very excited to be here to talk to you about some of the things John talked about earlier and how we can really sell smarter and achieve a lot of our goals given all of the changing dynamics that are happening out in the world that we've all seen in the last 5 to 10 years. We're going to be talking a lot about that, and you've heard a lot about the research, but I'll be sharing some interesting new research which you may find valuable for you, just to support how these latest tools and techniques really will be critical to your success, both as an organization and as well personally, to help you make your numbers, your targets, and achieve your goals, whatever they are. We all know that what worked before in the past, and I can all vouch for it because I'm one of those guilty parties as well, as we say, death by PowerPoint, not having dynamic great information at our disposal at any one time, maybe not being as informed as we need to be in front of customers. These are all things that we would perhaps get away with in the past, but not in today's fast-changing environment. So we're going to be talking about a little bit about that, and as I can see here, let me just put down here. All right, hopefully you can see my screen and my second screen. There we go. Can you see my screen?
Yes, I can.
Thank you, John. So I have a couple of personas here, as you can see here. Thank you, John, for the great description. I'm a little bit embarrassed. That's the reason I put my design on the right-hand side here, just so that you won't recognize me as much. But then people started saying, well, we need to see what you really look like. The reason I have the cartoon on the right-hand side is this is just a simple digital technique, and you'll be seeing a little bit more of this later. Visual selling, where people much more responsive, much more engaged when they see cartoons or they see drawings. And so this is one of the simple digital techniques as we move more towards, less towards face-to-face meetings, but also towards more digital media to help engage our clients and our customers even more. So as John pointed out, I have been in sales and channels management for the last 25 years, working with very large companies, but also in different industries now in terms of whether it's in banking, pharmaceutical, as well as, of course, IT. Just a very quick overview of SETA. We have been doing quite a bit of trainings across all 4 continents, not Antarctica yet, but we've trained a lot of people. But what's really important for us is really that we do excellent work, and our people really achieve very high satisfaction ratings and would recommend us. And that's basically how we've been driving a lot of our new business, is through you, through some great recommendations and doing great work with the people that we've trained, which we'll share with you a little bit later on. We also have some global partners that we work with that help us extend our expertise to different areas. So as John, obviously, with Delta SaaS Services, great expertise on helping clients move from on-prem or from their current to the cloud. Dolphin Digital for some great digital assets, which we'll be talking about later. We also work with CEB, which is now Gardner Group, for sales approaches such as Challenger Sale. In terms of the latest digital presentation techniques, we work with 2Win Global. So that is how do you sell more online? How do you sell remotely that your clients can actually speed up the process, the whole sales process, by doing everything remotely. And we have some other great partners such as Eames in terms of inside sales organizations, and AlignMe, which are experts in marketing and helping tie the gap between sales and marketing so that we can all achieve as much as 10 to 20% more revenues by closing that link. We're going to be talking a little bit about that. So let's talk about what we're going to do about today. First, we're going to talk about, so you who are on the line here, why should you change? Maybe things are going great for you today. And why should you change now? And then, why should you change with some of the things we're going to be talking? And why should your clients change or your customers change with you? We're going to be talking about what is smarter selling and what is necessary to drive you and your company to have more profitable results as we move. Again, for those of you who are moving to the cloud, it's more important, but also for any sales organization to help meet their goals more and more in today's ever-changing environment. Then we'll be talking about very specific digital sales techniques and tools, and we're going to be looking at a few, not everything, because there's quite a bit out there, but give you some practical case studies so that you can actually sort of get a handle on and get some real feel for what some companies like yourselves are doing in this digital world and helping themselves migrate, given all those changes as well. So if that's okay, I'd like to move forward. And we don't have the opportunity really to hear from you, but if you can write in the chat box, and John, maybe you could translate this for me back when you get this. As we go through this presentation, I'd really like to hear from you. I'd like to make this as interactive as possible. If you could write in, first of all, your names and which company you're from and which location you're calling from, that would be great. Which part of the UK or any other parts of Europe or anywhere else that you may be calling from, that would be great because it allows us to get a little bit more of a handle of you. And then also, what are your specific challenges in today's increasingly digital world as you move from your organizations with your sales teams, or maybe you as a salesperson? Maybe you're being challenged by your customers in certain different ways, specific ways in terms of presentations, in terms of getting information, maybe even getting access to people. Please feel free to use the chat box to interact with us anytime, and as well as putting in any questions that you have as we go through this presentation. So let's talk about the first topic, which is, why should you or why should we change? And why should we change now? And why should our clients change with us? So just give you a little bit of background, and maybe you've heard some of this research before, but there's been a lot of changes, as you know, in the last 5 to 10 years. And here are some highlights. First of all, there are more and more people getting involved in the average business-to-business buying decision process. According to a study by CEB, now Gartner, that number has increased just in the last 2 years from 5.4 stakeholders to 6.8 stakeholders involved in every B2B sale and every B2B decision. So just imagine you're thinking about an opportunity that you're working on right now. How many people are you talking with? And that's a big question that more and more people are getting involved, as we'll talk about later, because of the complexity and because of the risk averseness and because of the amount of information that people have access to. More and more people are getting involved in every B2B decision that's getting involved. And the way I like to look at this is really 6.8 reasons for our client or customers to say no to us. If we haven't contacted them all, who are they potentially looking at, and what information are they getting? Another interesting statistics is that 85% of B2B buyers are now using social media to be more informed on vendors. I always like to say that, in the past, companies used to go to us to get information, go to us being the sales teams, because that was where they got their information. Well, today with the explosion of information, customers are trying to actually avoid talking to us salespeople. The last thing they want to do is talk to a human brochure about products and services. They're looking more for a conversation, a trusted business advisor that will help them sort out all of the mess that's out there in the world and make it easy for them to achieve their objectives, and looking for you to be that trusted business advisor. And a lot of that information they're getting on the internet and socially. And another statistics is that 90% of decision makers say that they never respond today to the typical outbound marketing techniques such as telemarketing. In fact, many of them are actually going out looking for information on discussion groups such as LinkedIn or on other business areas that are online right now. And so our ability to be able to connect to them, to integrate ourselves with those 6.8 people is even more critical in an online fashion. So if you think about it from yourselves, remember we talked about the 6.8 people. Well, what are they doing before they're actually, when they're going through their entire customer buying process? If you look at their buying process today, where are they spending? Where are your decision makers spending their time? And in the research that's been happening, over 65% of our buyers don't even pick up the phone. Oh, sorry, our buyers, your buyers, are not calling you until they're 65% of the way through their customer buying journey. And that's an incredible statistic. Look at what they're doing. The first 27% on the right-hand side, you can see they're researching independently online what's out there, helping them solve their business problems. And then the next 22% is they're meeting with internal stakeholders, getting alignment and other buying groups to get them bought in to make sure that this is a company-wide decision. And then they're actually, for 18% of the time, researching independently and online for themselves to make sure that they have all of their needs properly identified before they actually go to a request for proposal or actually call the vendors. And the interesting statistic here, as you're seeing here, is that according to some research study that came out this October 2017, they're only spending 17% of their time meeting with you or meeting with us, potential suppliers, out of their entire customer buying journey. And that's a staggering number, because if their customer has actually shortlisted you and you're down to one of 3 vendors, just think about how much time they're actually spending with you. Maybe 1/3 of that, of their entire customer journey, of that 17% on you. So in the past, let's look at this a little bit closer. In the past, we call this what we call the serial sales engine. And in the past, and it's still happening a lot today, what we saw is we had marketing's help, giving us leads, right? The old SQLs or MQL, marketing qualified leads, where marketing does a lot of prospecting, does the social media, and then eventually hands those leads over to the salesperson in person. And the salesperson would then take a sales qualified lead and then make sure that they do whatever they can to close the business. Well, in today's world, just because this in person begins, it doesn't mean that online ends. So what we mean by that is very simple. Your buyers are engaging throughout their customer buying journey. And if you look at this graph, from the time they engage early in their customer buying process, they're doing a lot of research, as I mentioned. They're looking up what their needs are, how they can be met. They're looking at what vendors are out there. In the middle, they're doing presentations and demonstrations, or they're getting other buyers involved. And even late in their customer buying process, when they're actually doing their due diligence, doing the terms and conditions, checking references, they're still going online and doing a lot of research online. So the key message here is that no matter whether you're a millennial or a Generation or X or a boomer like myself, we're still doing a lot of information, a lot of our fact gathering and information throughout our entire customer buying journey. So this is very interesting. So the real question that comes out afterwards is, so what are your buyers doing? What are your clients or customers doing? And so if you look at some of the key, and this is by no means a fully exhaustive list, but if you look at the buying journey for one of your customers, early in the process you can see they're doing a number of different steps, like identifying their business problems that they're trying to solve. In the middle of the process, they're looking at the different supplier solutions. And later on, they're confirming their budgets and they're finalizing their terms and conditions. They're doing all of these key buying tasks, which I'm sure you all know very quickly. But the interesting thing is they're doing a lot of things digitally as well, such as what you see here on the screen. They're learning, for example, in the early phases about the different solutions online. In the middle, they're doing comparison and benchmarking across different vendors and even looking at pricing for your solutions and products. And late in the game, they're looking at your customer references and they're looking at other solutions and, again, benchmark and value business cases online so that they can justify this to their senior management to get approvals. So there's a lot of key digital business tasks that your buyers are doing online throughout their customer buying journey. So the key messages here of why change, why should you change now, and why should you change, why should the customers change with you, is because your companies, your clients and your customers, or we, for example, have very limited access to our customers. Again, if there's 6.8 decision makers, we don't have access to all of them, but they are going online. Many of these interactions, and I like to call them a digital cocktail party, because they're going online through LinkedIn. They're going in through all other kinds of social media sites to get information about you, about your company, so that they can help them make better, more informed decisions. And so what's really neat is it is a single view for you and your customers, a single view by having what we call a parallel sales engine. Not just the marketing people doing the finding of the leads, the MQLs at the beginning of the process, and then handing it over the fence to you, the salesperson, to do the final closing, but as customers are doing more and more of their research right from the early stages to the end, doing a parallel engine where we're both digitally and salespeople are working online from the beginning to the middle to the end. So I hope that gives you a little bit of some indications of why this is really happening and why we need to be involved more and more throughout the entire customer's journey. And that's why when we talk about digital selling, we, as all sales and sales leadership, need to drive more profitable results by doing things differently, by being smarter, by taking what we have with our current sales model and building on that by doing some key things, which I'll talk about in a minute, and adding some of these new latest and greatest sales techniques to help us, again, achieve our goals more profitably and quicker. So let me just quickly take a quick look at that. Your customers, another thing that's really changed as a result of the dynamics in the last 5 years is your customers are expecting value almost from the time they engage with you immediately. So this is where one of the digital techniques we'll talk about later, challenger selling or insight by selling, is really important, because when you engage with your customers, they've already talked to maybe some of your competitors, and they're looking for you to be that trusted advisor and tell them something about their business they don't know. So value is achieved right from the first time they meet with you throughout their entire process of their customer buying process, when they're starting to look at your presentations, and right to the time that they start implementing your solutions. Customers' expectations are much higher. They expect to see value much quicker and much more rapidly. And it really depends on really your role within the organization. So let me give you an example. I've done a recent project with some COOs of some very large IT multinational companies. And what they did simply was they looked at a combined virtual enablement program where they started off with some MOOCs. Maybe many of you have heard of MOOCs, which are basically e-learnings, but learnings that you can develop specifically for your key sales teams. So once they've done these MOOCs or these e-learnings, then they would actually have some virtual trainings where it's a little bit more interactive and they can actually get some hands-on, all virtually. So again, virtual implementations of sales trainings. And then they have the face-to-face training for the real hard application of those key skills and behaviors that they need to change. Again, this is a transformation, and you do need to have a combination of the virtual and the MOOC style trainings with the face-to-face training, so your sales teams and you as a salesperson can really apply in your real world how this works. And so this is a great program that we've been able to roll out and show some great business impact, which I'll share with you a little later on. But some of these techniques as well can be used for sales leadership, sales management, and you as salespeople to, again, achieve and exceed your quota year after year more rapidly. So let's talk a little bit about, we talked a lot about the why, and we've talked a little bit about, what it is that we should be doing and some of these transformations and changes that are really being driven by your customers in their world, not so much the sales techniques, but by your customers. And let's see how some of these sales techniques can help you sell better and faster and achieve your goals more profitably. So if we go back to what we talked about earlier, we said earlier that your customers are doing more and more of their research online, whether at the beginning of their sales process, of their customer buying process, or in the middle, or at the end of their buying process. They're doing more and more of their work throughout that entire process. And so we'll look at some specific digital sales tools and techniques that can help your buyers, again, achieve their goals quicker, be that trusted advisor, and do it in a way that's really engaging, that really excites them and differentiates you from any of your competitors as well. So let's start looking at some of these right now. So let's first of all look at how we build, starting with building a strategy about your website. So if you are a partner, John talked a little bit about channel partners of a multinational organization, a reseller, or an independent software vendor, then some of the things that your customers are doing when they're looking for solutions are they're going online. And building a successful strategy around your website so it's easy for them to find you, it's easy for them to know that you are really the best person on the planet to help solve their problems, can be done in some very simple techniques. First of all, your goals may be simply through your website to increase your brand or your awareness. It may be to increase your exposure and your reach, or to engage better with your prospects and get new prospects. It may be to get at the top of the search engine ranking. It very simply may be to increase your number of leads that you get or accelerate your sales cycle. And so there's some great techniques for building a strategy around your website, such as thought leadership, which I'll talk about in the next slide, providing specific insights to your clients. And there's some great, again, case studies and examples. Many of you who are based in the UK may know AutoTrader. If you go to autotrader.co.uk and you look under the business side where they sell to their dealers, they have defined a typical dealer roadmap, how dealers work in their day-to-day life, and what they need in each stage of the dealer's buyer's journey, from the time that they're sourcing cars to the time they're selling cars. They have done a great job of finding out all the activities that their buyers to their dealers, their dealer cars need, and how they can help them with their particular services and products. So that's a great example of how they've developed great and relevant content, and then networking that through specific social media sites to specific buyers and buyer groups, so that they really resonate with very powerful insights and messages tailored to those buyers groups. And as we showed you earlier in the previous slide, we know what your clients and what your customers are doing. All we have to do is build a strategy around what they're looking for to help make it easy for them to find everything on your website. The second piece is really about thought leadership. So how do we get there's a lot of competition out there. So how do we differentiate ourselves from the rest of the pack? And how do we get more leads and drive more lead generation by being seen as thought leaders within our industry or within our sector? And there's a couple of key concepts about thought leadership which are really interesting. And the first one, as I mentioned earlier, about insights. If you as experts of you all have great expertise and great products and services, you already have good understanding of your buyers' problems, then you can build some very simple strategies and tactics to go and, again, attract your buyers or buying groups to that problem, because that's what they're interested in. If you're talking about the language that they want to talk about, then you have a much greater likelihood that they're going to come to you, to your website, and listen to you. A good example of that is simply when you go to LinkedIn discussion groups, as an example. If you go there, a lot of CXOs or decision makers, chief executive officers, CIOs, go to those discussion groups because they're looking for help to help them fix their problems. And again, this is a great strategy, some great strategies that you can help to develop to help them find answers to their problems that lead to your solutions. Another great concept of thought leadership is building what we call a content grid. Content grid is simply something that says, what are the different subjects that are interesting to your buyers that they will want to read about? And so you can talk about what their problem is and what are the consequences, triggers, and causes of those problems, and build a content grid which gives you an amazing amount of great content that's really relevant to your buyers and what they're looking to read from you. Once we've got some great content and we understand how to present our problems, then what we do a process called amplification, which is really deciding where are the social media networks that your buyers go to, and how can we, again, put all that great content, whether it's blogs or articles or RSS web feeds, and amplify that through as many social media sites as possible to get the best reaction and get the most amount of hits and people interested calling you. And then lastly, as part of this, we do a lot of things to make sure we're executing well, and there's some great best practices. So for some of you who have expertise on search engine optimization or some other great tools and tips which we talk about in this, these help you execute with excellence and measure using A/B testing, some very simple but very effective techniques to see, are you getting the amount of leads? Are you meeting your goals to achieve what you're looking for and also become thought leaders for your sector? So those are just some areas where thought leadership can really help you, again, put you to the top of the pack. Some other areas that are really interesting is what we call the digital selling motion. And here, if you're a salesperson or a pre-sales person and you're engaging with your customers, the traditional approaches of PowerPoint or meeting people face-to-face or any of the traditional approaches are now being, again, much more challenged, and customers have much higher expectations. What they're looking from you is, as I mentioned earlier, is with my cartoon of my face, is they're looking for some engaging ways to work with you. It could be either storytelling, or it could be what we call whiteboarding, digital whiteboarding, which you can do easily online by identifying your customers' needs, by talking about the problems, as we talked about earlier, that are relevant to your customers, coming up with some solutions in business terms on how they can improve and fix those problems, and then showing the business impact and the value that they would get in being able to fix that. All graphically, all visually, all very easily, so that your clients are engaged in a great two-way conversation. Another way to do that is when we're doing sales presentations or demos. We use some techniques called visual selling. Visual selling is very simply coming up with some very simple ways to draw. And this is really not easy, coming up with cartoons or coming up with some easy ways to draw pictures and visually sell so that your customers are absolutely engaged and very excited being part of the solution, not just being a participant in a PowerPoint presentation. And lastly, there's something what we call at the end of the process, or it could be in the middle to the end, where we actually show and demonstrate in very monetized terms the business value to the customer in doing this solution with you. So by demonstrating very specific value-centric terms, and we talk about business value, meaning understanding the key performance indicators that are relevant to each of the 6.8 stakeholders that you're dealing with, that can result in a very powerful conversation. Coming up with return on investment that talks in terms of the customer's terms, being able to have the language of the chief financial officer, because as we know, many opportunities and many proposals are then sent to the CFOs or financial directors to get approvals. Being able to have those conversations in financial terms increases your chances exponentially by showing how you can deliver value, business value for your solutions. Again, here are some just digital ways that we can help share, that we can help improve this, and all of this will help immensely accelerate your opportunities because you don't have to meet the customer face-to-face on every opportunities. There will be opportunities where it is absolutely necessary, but in my experience in working with many leading organizations, more and more of these conversations are happening digitally, and it's getting to the point even where companies have a process called 5 clicks to a close, where they are able to identify the 5 steps of a closing process, of a sales process, where the client gets everything they need to be able to buy from them in just 5 clicks. Very exciting times right now. Another great form of a tool, a digital tool, is what we call digital video sales transformations, or video sales. And more of our customers are actually doing a lot of training and a lot of videos online. They're actually salespeople even being able to have introductory business cards in videos to introduce themselves, because video emails are opened up, have a 75% chance greater open rate than the traditional emails or the email blast that we send out. Video is hot. Video is something that people are much more engaged in watching. In one particular, let me share one particular project that we did with a very large IT company. This company was trying to train a number of their commercial sales teams on different sales techniques, much like some of the things we talked about earlier. And what they did is they defined the different stages in the sales process, and they created a very short 2 to 3 minute video for each one of those sales processes. And through those videos, each of the commercial sales team members could learn what it is, why it was important to them, and how they could do that. So these are, again, as I mentioned earlier, these are great e-learning videos or refresher videos, very engaging, exciting ways for your salespeople to learn before, during, and even after a training, a face-to-face sales training, to reinforce and embed this in their day-to-day work so that it sticks, that they actually can use some of these techniques very, very simply and easily. So again, this particular customer did over 50 videos, very engaging, great feedback from all of the executive management right down to the sales team. And you can see here, just by looking at the videos here, that it was fantastic, because the salespeople could actually sort by whatever videos they wanted to see. They could actually put which ones they were their favorites, and then if they had questions, they could actually put it on in a social way to be able to ask questions or engage with other people that had similar questions, or shared best practices as well. And then just to summarize some of these digital tools, as I mentioned, and techniques, this is by no means a full list. There's many more which we haven't talked about. One of the things that we've been able to do is also put all of these great assets and techniques on what we call the digital sales platform. So we have everything from assessor tools, and John may have talked about this earlier in some of the other webinars that we've had, but basically assessing where are you today and knowing where your gaps are, so that you can actually say, okay, maybe we need to fix these and prioritize these areas within our sales teams, or for myself on a personal basis first. Come up with a personal journey map. So where do I need to get trained, and what are the assets available for me? And then coming up with a great asset library, video library, as I shared with you earlier, putting all your marketing tools and assets all in one simple repository so that you can actually search, look, and help support everything from your customer's buying journey right from the beginning to the end, and support your own sales journey and your personal transformation journey going forward. So very exciting ways to get engaged and actually move forward in that. And so if I know, sitting where you are right now, there's the big question I ask is, well, so what? So how will this really help me? And we measure this. We do a lot of measurement to make sure that this is actually something that works. And we measure this across a number of different key performance indicators, some of which that you can see here. For example, how much have some of these techniques been able to increase our pipeline value? Or how much have they decreased our time to close before we took some of these workshops and trainings and used some of these tools and techniques and after? And how much of this has increased our win rates? Maybe your win rates are 10 to 1. For every 10 opportunities, you're maybe closing 1. We have great case studies and shared experiences to share with you, and I'd be happy to do that. How we've been able to reduce that from 10 to 1 to 5 to 1, and even down to 2 to 1, where you're winning 1 deal out of every 2 prospects that you're actually working on. Great success stories. So just to summarize everything we talked a little bit about, we talked about how you can use some of these techniques with what you're doing today. You don't have to make this huge transformation shift all in one happen. This is what we call an evolution, not a revolution. And you can use the current sales models, but maybe do some things differently, maybe a little better. Build on the great things that you're doing already, and add some of these great techniques that you're using that we propose that you use now. As I showed you, there are some maybe new things that you haven't seen here before. We'd be happy to talk to you more about that, whether it's building a strategy around websites, whether it's the digital, visual selling, thought leadership, having a much more buyer-centric view of our sales process. And we know all of that, especially if those of you who are going from an on-prem world to a SaaS world are making that progress, that transition to the cloud. We know that profitability, lowering your capital acquisition costs, profitability is king, and as well as improving your sales and improving your overall results. So I always love to show a little bit of this slide. Again, as I mentioned in one of my first slides, we're really about our references and about you saying great things about us. And we really do value all the great comments and the great work and the things that we've learned from our great clients as well that we incorporate in a lot of these trainings. So again, we'd be very happy to share more of some of these testimonials with you at your convenience. So that's a very quick overview of digital sales tools and techniques. I hope you found that interesting. One of the things that I'd like to just, before I turn it off, is before I propose, is just throw it up for any questions and answers that you may have. I've said a lot of very interesting things, but I'm sure you've got a lot of things to think about and chew on. Maybe there's some questions that you have. I'm very happy to take any questions at this point.
Okay, thanks, Mark. There have been a couple that have come in. And first of all, thank you for covering so much ground in such a short period of time. I'm sure everyone found it interesting and lots to dwell on. First question that's kind of come in, Mark. Obviously, you've had a lot of experience going on these journeys in the past. What are some of the typical obstacles that you've come across with companies as you've helped them move towards digital sales and some of the techniques you've talked about? So I guess the question is, what are the classic obstacles people are going to find?
Well, that's a very common and a great question, because I think part of it is just the mindset. And as we see some of these new things, it's very hard for us as sales leaders or sales people to take many of these things on board because we're so used to doing things the way we're doing them. What worked for us well in the past seems to continue to work for us. So you can't argue with that, and we don't want to. But what we do find is, as it's not so much about what we're doing well, it's about what's happening with your customers and how they're changing. And as we've seen, they're doing more and more of their shopping, their learning online, and they don't want the classic human brochure, as I mentioned. They want to be engaged more. They want a business conversation. They want you as a sales team to be that trusted advisor and tell them something they don't know, rather than about products and services conversations. So the biggest obstacle, John, that we find is really the mindset change. And that's where we typically say that it shouldn't be just a one-shot training. This should be a really more programmatic approach. It should be something that you have as part of as I mentioned earlier, a transformational program. Start off with some MOOCs or some e-learnings. Maybe do some virtual learning courses. Then do some face-to-face training, and then follow it up with some coaching, and embed this in the day-to-day work that you're doing. Because in our experience, it takes about 66 days. This is actually the research that's been done by CEB Gardner. It takes 66 days to change behaviors. And what that simply means for us is that we need to continue working on a particular skill or a particular behavior if we really want to change it and take advantage of these techniques to help us achieve our results.
Okay, thanks, Mark. I'm sure there's a lot more we could discuss on that, but very interesting. Of course, one of the great things about going through some of these sales techniques, people want to apply it to us and to your discussion. So they've basically said this is a great theory, they like it, but what's the investment and how long before they see value? So turning that one back on you, Mark.
Yes. So again, we're very conscious because we work with small companies as well as big companies, whether you're a partner, maybe a small partner. We work with some small partners that are really only a handful of people, and they're resellers of some big software solutions. And so we need to be able to show value very quickly. And that answer is a big it depends, John. But what we're very conscious of, because we all are working to make sure that we see a return on investment for the hard dollars that you're investing in your sales team, is to show, first of all, this is what your customers want. And if we are aligning with what our customers want, we know, and we are engaging with our customers better. We're saying, trusted business advisor, we're able to understand value in our customers' terms. The customers at a very minimum, and we've been able to show results in weeks and sometimes in a month, 2 months, 3 months for even the largest of companies. We've been able to track using A/B testing, using other techniques, how quickly we've been able to free up deals that maybe were dead or that were blocked and stuck. And we're able to free up those deals because of some of the techniques, the challenger sales techniques we talked about, some of these engaging digital selling, whiteboarding techniques, because again, it's all about the customer. And when the customer is coming to you and saying, we really like that, you're really different, then we know this really works. So we're very conscious about this, and the sooner that you get the return on investment, the sooner you're going to be more successful and achieve your objectives.
Okay, well, thanks for that, Mark. We are running a little bit out of time, but I know you've got some thoughts on how you could perhaps continue this discussion with people who have attended today or people listening to the recording.
Yes, absolutely. So this is hopefully the beginning of our conversations together. I hope this has been informative and you've learned a few things along this session here in a very short time. I would love to stay in touch with you, and I always love to offer another conversation on how some of these techniques, we can explore some of these techniques for your particular company. And maybe we can set up a time, 1 hour, whatever. I always propose 1 hour just so that we can keep it more or less focused on some of the things you're doing today that are working well, and some of the things the challenges that you're having maybe with some of your customers, and perhaps looking at specific sales tools and techniques that are out there related specifically to your company. I'd love to engage with you, talk to you much more specifically, and tailor something much more relevant to you, and I'd like to offer that to you as part of the session today.
Okay, well, thanks, Mark. Hopefully a number of people will take advantage of that opportunity. I know we've got kind of a wrap-up chart now. Mark, I think you're clicking. Really just to say a couple of things. We will be sending out a copy of these charts. We will also have a recording available for you to run back through it. We're also offering the opportunity of a free 14-day trial of our sales and marketing online planning tool. So you'll receive all those offers in the next few days. And we have one additional webinar that we've added to the series from another of our strategic partner called EAMS, which is about inside sales, which is very definitely an important part of the smarter sales and marketing mix. So they're running a session on the 14th, which is called Inside Sales Masterclass. So we hope you'll be able to join us on that. I very much appreciate your time joining us today. Look out in your inbox for the recording and assets we've talked about, and we hope to talk to you, and please do take advantage of Mark's offer, and hope to see you all again soon. Thank you and goodbye.